The heavy brass key felt like a cold, metallic accusation in my palm, a tangible link to the secrets my son, Silas, and his wife Rhea had taken with them to their watery grave. I'm Thane Garrison, a 66-year-old retired Coast Guard commander, and my eyes have seen too many storms, my skin weathered like old oak. But nothing prepared me for the storm brewing inside my own family. The estate attorney, a man whose name I've long forgotten, slid that key across the desk in his sterile office. He was a professional, accustomed to the grim business of death, yet his hands trembled as he delivered Silas and Rhea's final instructions. He pushed a slip of paper toward me, bearing GPS coordinates that made no sense. Silas and Rhea were adamant, Commander, he whispered, his voice cracking. You go alone. No one else. Just you. My brow furrowed. Why the coordinates? My son's property was in the city, not the coast. He always claimed that coastal land was worthless scrub, a tax write-off. The lawyer's eyes darted nervously toward the door, before he leaned in, revealing the true nature of this meeting. Silas and Rhea had left a dead man's switch instruction. The key was only to be delivered to me if I hadn't heard from my daughter, Alora, about the property's true nature within 6 months of their funeral. It had been exactly 6 months to the day. Would a man who despised the sea truly buy a house perched on its very edge? Or was the ocean just a convenient place for him to disappear? That question gnawed at me as I left the office and climbed into my old truck. The drive toward Bodega Bay was a gauntlet of gray. A dense, unnatural fog swallowed Highway 1, reducing the world to the salt spray on my windshield and the rhythmic whine of the engine. Silas and Rhea were scientists, researchers who valued logic above all else. Yet, they had lured me out here, to a place where landmarks ceased to exist. The GPS led me off the main road and down a private, unmarked path, hidden behind a wall of twisted cypress trees. Their branches reached out like skeletal fingers through the mist. The GPS chirped a final, mocking command. You have reached your destination. But all I saw was a wall of gray. I pulled the truck to a stop before a massive iron gate. The muffled silence of the fog was absolute, pressing against my eardrums until the blood hammered in my temples. I stepped out, expecting a rusted relic, a testament to the worthless lot Silas had described. Instead, as I reached for the lock, my fingers came away slick. The mechanism had been freshly oiled, the metal gleaming despite the damp air. I looked down at the gravel drive. There, preserved in the moist earth, were fresh tire tracks leading inside. I recognized those treads. They were the exact width of my son-in-law Leander's Mercedes, and the engine was still ticking in the silence of the fog. I gripped the iron handle of my service pistol through my jacket pocket, my boots crunching on gravel that had been disturbed only minutes ago. The mist was so thick, it felt like wet wool against my face, but the heat coming from those fresh tire tracks was undeniable. I followed the indentations past a wall of wind-twisted cypress trees toward the sprawling cedar structure Silas had always called a dilapidated investment. My eyes scanned for the glint of a luxury sedan, expecting to see Leander's car parked arrogantly at the front door, but the driveway was empty. It didn't make sense. The tracks, I was certain, belonged to his Mercedes, yet they ended abruptly in a square of concrete that looked too clean for this part of the coast. As I stepped onto the pad, I noticed the faint, oily seams of a hidden hydraulic lift. The car hadn't just left, it had been swallowed underground. A strange, lingering scent of ozone hung in the heavy air, a sharp contrast to the natural rot of the salt marsh. The house loomed out of the Bodega Bay fog, its windows dark and reflective like obsidian mirrors, watching me approach with a cold, predatory gaze. I stood there for a moment, listening to the muffled sound of my own heartbeat, wondering what kind of people build a fortress and call it a shack. I pulled the heavy brass key from my pocket. I expected the resistance of a rusted bolt or the groan of a neglected hinge, but the moment I turned the metal, the door glided open on silent industrial bearings. A house on this coast should smell of salt and rot. This place smelled like a surgical suite. The foyer was a jarring transition from the rugged Sonoma exterior. There was no sawdust from the supposed renovations Alora had mentioned, no exposed beams waiting for a carpenter's touch. Instead, I found a hall paneled in tempered glass and white cedar, pristine and smelling of high-grade hospital antiseptic and lemon oil. My boots felt heavy and filthy on the white floors. Silas, Rhea, what the hell were you two building out here? The question was a whisper that died instantly in the acoustic tiled ceiling. I moved deeper into the corridor, my hand still resting on the weapon in my pocket. The cold touch of tempered glass met my shoulder as I navigated a turn toward what should have been the kitchen. The silence wasn't the silence of an empty house. It was the hum of a predator holding its breath. Every light was recessed, casting a shadowless glow that made the air feel thin, almost pressurized. I reached a digital security panel mounted by the kitchen entrance, its sleek black surface contrasting with the wood. There was no keypad, only a glowing glass plate designed for a biometric scan. My hand hovered over it, an instinctive rejection of the technology, but curiosity won over caution. I pressed my thumb against the glass, expecting a red rejection light and a siren. Instead, the screen flickered to life, displaying a line of text that sent a chill through my marrow. Emergency authorization. Commander Garrison. My thumbprint had been registered before Silas and Rhea died. The panel beeped green, and the entire wall of the library began to slide back with the hiss of a pressurized seal, revealing a world my son and daughter-in-law had died to keep in the dark. I stepped through the threshold, my hand instinctively going to the small of my back, but the sight before me didn't require a weapon. It required a miracle. The pressurized seal of the hidden library wall finished its hiss, leaving me standing in a state of utter disbelief. This wasn't a library. It was a high-tech laboratory, a pristine, humming sanctuary of scientific endeavor. The air, previously sterile, now carried a faint, metallic tang. Banks of servers hummed with quiet power, their indicator lights blinking like a constellation of digital stars. Glass tubes and beakers, filled with brightly colored liquids, lined shelves, reflecting the soft glow of monitors displaying complex genetic sequences. In the center of the room, under a focused beam of light, stood a large cylindrical chamber of polished chrome and reinforced glass. It looked like something out of a science fiction movie, a cryogenic pod, or a highly advanced medical device. My eyes scanned the room, trying to make sense of the impossible. Silas, my son, had always been brilliant, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. A large monitor on a nearby desk flickered to life, displaying a video file. I hesitated, then pressed play. Silas's face filled the screen, looking older, more tired than I remembered, but with an intense fire in his eyes. "Dad," he began, his voice raspy, "if you're seeing this, then Rhea and we didn't make it. The accident, it wasn't an accident." My breath hitched. He continued, "We uncovered something, Dad. Something horrifying. A global conspiracy. Protocol 7, they call it. A program designed to cull the population, to control resources. They're developing a bioweapon, a targeted virus that can be activated by specific genetic markers. It's silent, undetectable, and designed to look like natural causes." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "Rhea and we found a way to counteract it. A genetic therapy, a vaccine, but we needed a secure, isolated location to develop and test it. This house, it's a cover. The lab is beneath it. We've been working tirelessly, trying to save as many as we can." His eyes pleaded with me through the screen. "They're coming for us, Dad. They know we're close to a breakthrough. If anything happens, you must protect the children. Not just our son, little Silas, but all the children we've been working to save. They're the key to everything." The video ended abruptly, replaced by a single, chilling word. Leander, my son-in-law. The fresh tire tracks, the hydraulic lift. A cold dread seeped into my bones. Leander wasn't just my son-in-law. He was a high-ranking official in a powerful pharmaceutical corporation, a company Silas had often criticized for its unethical practices. My daughter, Alora, had always been fiercely loyal to Leander, defending his every move. Had they been involved? Was Alora complicit? Just then, a faint whirring sound echoed from the cylindrical chamber. I rushed to it, my heart pounding. Inside, suspended in a nutrient-rich fluid, was a small, pale figure. A child. A baby. My grandson. Silas. He was alive. He was safe. And he was the first of many. The chamber was a life support system, a highly advanced incubator. A small digital display showed his vital signs, stable and strong. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and an alarm blared. The lab was under attack. I grabbed my pistol, the familiar weight a small comfort in the face of the unknown. I had to get Silas out. I had to protect him. I had to finish what my son and Rhea started. The next few hours were a blur of adrenaline and instinct. I navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the hidden lab, the alarms screaming, the air thick with the smell of ozone and fear. I found a hidden escape tunnel, a contingency Silas had built, leading to a small, isolated cove. I carried little Silas, wrapped in a blanket, his tiny, fragile body, a stark contrast to the chaos around us. As I emerged onto the beach, the fog had lifted, revealing the vast, indifferent ocean. A small inflatable boat was hidden beneath a tarp. Silas had thought of everything. I rowed out into the choppy waters, the baby cradled against my chest, the sounds of the attack fading behind us. I knew I couldn't go home. Not yet. Alora and Leander would be looking for me. They would know. I had to disappear, to protect little Silas, to honor my son's sacrifice. For months, I lived off the grid, moving from one safe house to another, always one step ahead, always watching, always planning. I learned to hack into secure networks, to decrypt encrypted files. I learned the true extent of Protocol 7, the names of the powerful individuals involved, the insidious reach of their conspiracy. And then, I found the evidence. A digital ledger, hidden deep within Leander's company servers, detailing the funding, the research, the human trials, the names of the victims, and the names of the perpetrators. The day I finally confronted Alora was one of the hardest of my life. I had arranged a meeting, ostensibly to discuss my mental decline. She arrived at my old house, her face a mask of concern, but her eyes held a cold, calculating glint. "Dad," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "you've been prone to wandering, especially since Silas died. You get confused." She had already filed a safety concern report with the medical board, planning to have me institutionalized. I played along, feigning senility, allowing her to lead me into the kitchen. She poured me a glass of water, her perfume cloying, masking the bitter chemical smell of the toxin reagent I'd hidden in my palm. I tested the water, and the strip turned a deep, bruised purple. A high-affinity benzodiazepine derivative, designed to induce amnesia and disorientation without leaving a trace. My blood turned to ice when I checked my daily pill organizer. Alora had replaced my heart medication with inert placebos. She wasn't just waiting for me to fade. She was actively dismantling my physiology to ensure my mental decline was permanent. A home is a sanctuary until the person holding the key wants you dead. I spent the next few hours under the guise of cleaning, moving with a sluggishness that masked my tactical precision. I installed micro-aperture high-definition cameras, hiding them in smoke detectors, air vents, and within the spine of a hollowed-out book. I routed the data through an old Coast Guard satellite bounce to bypass the home IP address, the high-pitched whine of the encryption bridge, a comforting song of resistance. How many accidents start with a glass of water and a daughter's worried smile? I moved to the foyer to set the final sensor, looking through the curtains at the street outside. 2 blocks down, a black SUV sat idling, its windows dark. The vultures from Bodega Bay had followed their prey to the city. I returned to the basement, the cool, dry air helping to steady my breathing as I powered up my tablet. "You think I'm the one who's blind, Alora?" I whispered as the screen flickered to life. But I've never seen more clearly. The grainy, blue-tinted light of the monitor showed the house in stark detail. I watched the first live feed catch Alora in the living room. She was no longer crying or acting the part of the devoted daughter. She looked sharp, cold, and utterly detached as she pulled a burner phone from her purse. I watched her lips move, mouthing with terrifying clarity, "Tonight." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The trap was set, and the bait was finally watching the hunters. I lay in the dark, my heart a heavy rhythmic drum against the mattress, waiting for my own daughter to walk through the door and try to kill me. The house was a tomb of silence, or so Alora believed. as she used her emergency key to bypass the deadbolt at 1 a.m. I didn't reach for my service weapon. Instead, I reached for my phone, watching the eerie green and black flicker of the night vision feed from the kitchen camera. Alora moved with a practiced, haunting silence, her face illuminated by the cold blue glow of her own smartphone. I watched her reach for the stove. With the clinical detachment of a scientist, she meticulously turned each gas knob, ensuring the pilot lights were extinguished first, so that the sudden, sharp hiss of gas escaping the burners remained uncombusted. She paused for a moment, her ghostly silhouette looking toward my bedroom door, and I felt a soul-crushing betrayal that no storm at sea could ever rival. I soon realized the message I had intercepted earlier wasn't just about the stove. As I monitored the exterior cameras, I saw that the external vents of my house had been taped shut from the outside. They were turning my home into a literal gas chamber. Gas is a patient killer. It doesn't need to strike. It just needs to exist. It fills the lungs like a silent tide rising until there is no room left for the soul. I waited perfectly still as the sharp, rotten egg smell of natural gas began to seep under my bedroom door, thick and suffocating. I heard Alora's car pull away, the gravel crunching beneath her tires like the closing of a coffin lid. But I had a plan. I had already activated the emergency ventilation system I'd installed, a silent, powerful fan that began to purge the gas from the house. I had also sent the video evidence of Alora's actions along with the digital ledger of Protocol 7 to a trusted contact in the investigative journalism world. By dawn, the house was clear, and the world was about to learn the truth. The arrests came swiftly. Alora and Leander were taken into custody, their carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of irrefutable evidence. The pharmaceutical company was exposed, its executives facing criminal charges. Protocol 7 was dismantled, its horrifying ambitions brought to light. In the aftermath, I stood at the water's edge, little Silas by my side. He was a bright, curious boy, a living testament to his parents' bravery. I had recently finalized the paperwork to deed the entire Bodega Bay estate to a specialized trust. It was no longer my fortress, it was now a permanent sanctuary for the survivors of Protocol 7, ensuring the land that saw so much blood became a home for the children Silas and Rhea had died to save. Forgiveness is a slow tide. It doesn't happen all at once. But eventually, the jagged edges of the rocks are worn smooth. I felt that smoothing now, a deep reconciliation with the man I had been, and the man I had to become. Steady as she goes, I whispered as I set the boy down on the cool, shifting texture of the wet sand. You've got the helm now. He didn't stumble. He simply stood there, watching the waves with a reflective depth that mirrored his namesake. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old Coast Guard commander's coin, the metal worn smooth by years of nervous habit. It represented a lifetime of following orders, of tactical rigidity, and of a war that had finally reached its conclusion. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a final, brilliant flare of gold across the water, I tossed the coin into the deep. I watched it vanish into the foam, a final resignation from my role as a soldier of the past, so that I could finally be a shepherd for the future. I didn't feel the loss of it. I felt the lightness of a mission completed. The silence that followed wasn't the empty kind that had haunted my house for years. It was a ringing, vibrant peace. I reached down and took the boy's hand, holding the compass that once belonged to both his father and mother, and together, we turned away from the water to walk home, carrying their legacy forward. I stood at the water's edge, the compass needle in the boy's hand settling true north, and realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the storm. I was simply standing in the light. The cycle of the tides would continue, but the garrison legacy was no longer a story of secrets and shadows. It was a heading, clear and unwavering, cut into the horizon. The boy looked up at me, his small voice barely over the waves. "Grandpa, where are we going?" I smiled, the first genuine smile in what felt like years, and knelt down to his level. "Home, little Silas. We're going home, and tomorrow I'll tell you all about your father and mother, the two bravest people I ever knew." I stood up, lifting him onto my shoulders, and we walked together along the shoreline, as the last light of day faded into the deep blue of evening. Behind us, the waves continued their eternal rhythm, washing away footprints, but never the memory of those who had walked before us. Looking back now, I realized the hardest truth was not discovering the conspiracy or facing the men who killed my son. The hardest truth was admitting that I ignored the warning signs inside my own home. I trusted blood more than character, and that nearly cost innocent lives. If there is one lesson from my family story, it is this: love should never blind you to truth. A real family story is not defined by loyalty at any cost, but by the courage to stand for what is right, even when the enemy shares your name. And if this family story proves anything, it's that silence can sometimes be more dangerous than betrayal. I also learned something painful about revenge. What began as a dad's revenge mission slowly became a responsibility to protect the future. True dad revenge is not about destruction. It's about defending those who cannot defend themselves. In the end, the real meaning of dad revenge was making sure my son's sacrifice saved lives, instead of disappearing into darkness. If I could give you one piece of advice, it would be this: never ignore the quiet unease in your heart when something feels wrong. Pride, denial, and blind love can build the perfect shelter for betrayal. I believe God sometimes allows us to walk through the darkest storms so we can finally see the truth in the light.